Release.
The Mars 2020 rover will initiate a long sought-after mission of returning Martian rocks and soil to the Earth for further study.
Finished their job, we got the spacecraft shipped off to Florida. Actually confirming life on another planet will be very hard to do with the instruments that we can fly. So one of the key steps that Perseverance is taking is collecting samples that can be brought back to Earth in the future and then analyzed with all the terrestrial laboratories we have, which should actually provide us a definitive answer to that question of whether life existed elsewhere.
Talk about anything. What do you want to know about Mars that you haven't already heard? We will be able to, as before with rovers, drive up to rocks, investigate them, figure out which ones are the most interesting, but this time we'll be able to then core a piece of that rock out into a sample about the size of a piece of chalk that is then sequestered in a tube, sealed, and that tube is cached on the rover to become part of a collection that we return back to Earth. Now, the reason that collecting samples is so important is because we can do some science analyses on Mars, but it pales in comparison to what we're able to do in Earth labs.
There you go. You can make a measurement right on the rock, just like that. When you send a rover or an orbiter to a distant place, you have to decide in advance what science you want to do. But that's limiting. It means you have to kind of guess what's the best instrument to do the job. If you bring the samples back, then you can subject them to every known laboratory, every known instrument. Instead of a handful of principal scientists, you'll have dozens or hundreds, maybe even thousands.
it will have a robot arm on the front of the rover, and that, along with the vision system, will have to detect sample tubes left on the surface of Mars by the NASA 2020 rover. It will have to detect them, autonomously use the robot arm to pick them up, store them on the rover, and then the rover has to drive back to the lander and deposit those sample tubes there. So because of the distance between Earth and Mars and the complexity in communicating with the rover, it needs to do that without human intervention from ground.
We wouldn't have these giant pieces of it, but as instruments got them, but I know they were ready for them to leave after 2.5 hours. Like the seen acetone, and we don't want that. And so, and again, that
Position of the materials in front of us. We use these remote sensing instruments.
When you go to the surface of Mars, you take an instrument, and what you take is what you get. But with the sample, when you bring it back to Earth, as we found from the lunar samples, that they're the gift that keeps on giving. Because the samples will remain, our ability to make measurements will evolve, they will get better and better over time, and we can always go back and revisit those samples that we've brought back to Earth.